friends.
Hey, mamas.
Welcome to My Invisible Disease podcast. We are here to share our struggles and hacks as two moms living with chronic illness.
Tune in and join our community as we share stories and experiences while we sort through the ups and downs of living with invisible disease.
Hey, Cassie.
Hey, girl.
How are you? I am super excited for today.
Me too.
So on today's podcast, we have Holly Francis, who is the author of Life Support: Surviving Guillain-Barre Syndrome. And, you know, this is a true story of how she turned her medical horror, and I mean it when I say that, like medical horror, after the birth of her daughter into a crusade to help others.
Yeah, I have known about her story for a while, so you're not going to believe it. I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode. Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about your story?
It started, it was almost 12 years ago now, and it started with a tingle in my fingertip. So it was very, very sudden and very, very severe. And I was at home with my daughter recovering from a C-section. I had just given birth to her. She would have been like 3.5 weeks old. And it was my first baby. And so I was just like so excited and adjusting to motherhood and all that. And I got this weird tingle in my finger. And I remember at the time thinking like, did I burn myself on the stove or something? Like it was kind of numb. Brushed it off. And then like an hour or so later, I was walking around the house and I just felt really tired and drained. But I mean, when you're a new mom, you're always tired and drained. And so, yeah, so I'm thinking, I just need a really good night's sleep. So I'm walking up the stairs that night and, you know, my legs are kind of feeling heavy and like, it's just harder to walk up the stairs than it kind of should be. And so it was kind of concerning, but like still the same thing. I just need a good night's sleep. But then the pain suddenly came on. And it was in my neck, in the back of my neck, and it almost felt like I had like slept weird or pinched a nerve or something. And so I remember Googling, like I went online and I'm like, hey, like I'm kind of having this weakness in my legs and I'm having this like tingling in my finger and, you know, this pain in my neck. And it actually said, you have a pinched nerve. And so it's funny how we go to Google and that we trust what Google says, right? So I actually, the pain got so severe, like I took some pain meds and it just did nothing. I actually drove myself to a Medi Center and was like, I have a pinched nerve. It's so bad. I need something more for like pain meds.
Well, especially when
I need to function.
Like,
so, and the doctor I seen was like, you know what, you probably do have a pinched nerve. I'm just going to give you basically some T4s and you can take those at home and we'll get you in to see a physiotherapist maybe tomorrow or the next couple of days. So I went home and, but things just got worse. The pain was more severe. I'm taking the T4s. They're doing nothing. And, I'm really struggling to kind of walk around. And in my head, I'm thinking like, wow, like this is a pinched nerve. Like this must be pretty severe. So I went to bed that night and I tried to go to sleep, but couldn't sleep. The pain was so bad. And I'm laying on the floor, actually, like trying to do all these stretches. And I'm Googling like pinched nerve relief and nothing's helping. And I had put my daughter to bed and then she woke up, of course, at like 3 a.m. to nurse. And I stood up from the floor and my legs just completely gave out on me. And like, I was just, I could barely even stand up. So it was at that point that I knew that it was much more than a pinched nerve. And I had my ex-husband, I had him drive me to the hospital and I said like, I need some pain meds. I need somebody to tell me what's going on. And I just had him drop me off because, I didn't want my newborn coming into an ER. And so I said, just pick me up in a couple hours once I see a doctor, not even realizing that, that would be the last time that I would actually step outside for 3 months.
Oh my God.
What? I don't know the whole story, so
turn the page. Tell her more.
Anticipation is killing me.
So I go into I go into the ER, and I was very lucky that a doctor that I saw, he's like, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I'm going to bring somebody down that might. And the neurologist looked me over and said, yeah, you're very weak in your legs. You're very weak in your hands. You're having this pain. I think I know what you have. And it's something called Guillain-Barre Syndrome. And I remember just staring at him going like, what's Guillain-Barre Syndrome? I've never heard those words before. I'm 26 at the time, so I'm thinking, like, what is a syndrome? I don't even know what that is. Like, is it a disease? And he said it's this rare autoimmune disorder, and it can come on very suddenly and very severely. We don't know how bad this is going to get, but basically it's affecting your nerves. And so it's basically paralyzing your body very slowly. And we don't know how bad it's going to get. So you're going to need to stay in the hospital for a little while, and we'll see. We'll just kind of monitor you. And I remember thinking, I got to go home. I got to get a baby. Like, I got to get back to her. I got to breastfeed. I can't do this. And he's like, this is an emergency. You're being admitted to the hospital. And from there, it just snowballed, and everything just got so severe. The paralysis spread very quickly, basically up my entire body. And within 72 hours of that very first symptom, I was completely paralyzed from the neck down, breathing on a ventilator. I could no longer breathe on my own again, put into ICU, and basically just really didn't know what was going to happen from there. Yeah.
Like a rare autoimmune?
So it's similar to multiple sclerosis. And yeah, most people have heard of MS. And so MS will affect the brain, whereas with GBS, it affects the nerves that not attached or not connected to the brain. So every other nerve basically in your body. And so it basically stops that ability from your body being able to transmit signals and basically be able to move.
Wow. And I mean, were you lucky to have
very lucky, very, very lucky. I meet a lot of GBS patients that if a doctor's never seen a case before, GBS only affects like 1 to 2 out of every 100,000 people. And so it's rare, but it still happens to a lot of people. But if a doctor's never seen it before, they may not recognize those symptoms. And so some people may be in and out of the hospital trying to see specialists and just not getting answers. So in my case, I was very lucky, especially because it was progressing so quickly as well, that they were able to see that progression. Not only could I feel it, but they could also see that as well.
Just the being on a ventilator. Like,
how long were you on a ventilator for, Holly?
So I was on a ventilator for 70 days and so over 2.5 months. And just basically in ICU and not able to breathe on my own and not able to communicate, not able to obviously talk or move or do anything. And so during that time, I was completely hopeless and felt like I was never going to get out of there. My newborn, my family brought in her to be by my side, and like they're putting her on my chest and we're trying to bond and stuff. But for me, it was just so hard. I was in so much pain, and it felt like my life was just completely over, and it felt like there was no hope for the future. And they're telling me that I was going to get better. But when you're in ICU and you can't breathe on your own and everyone's surrounding you, like you don't think that you're going to get better. And so it was such a very challenging time, and just especially emotionally, just knowing that, you know what, I waited so long to be a mom, and then all of a sudden it was just taken away from me. So very, very scary time. But over time I did start to get better, and I had amazing doctors, amazing nurses that took care of me. And, they were my motivation to keep going. Obviously my daughter was a huge motivation as well. I just wanted to get back to her. And over time, the paralysis eventually faded. And so I was able to kind of move my fingers and then move my hands. And then I had to learn how to breathe on my own, which was the most challenging part of the entire journey. But once I was able to do that, then I was able to get out of ICU and then start on my journey to recovery, which was learning how to do absolutely everything again.
Oh, that's crazy.
And then were you receiving treatment while you were in the hospital? Is this something that there's like ongoing treatment or?
So there isn't a cure for GBS, but there is treatment. And what the treatment is something called IVIG, which is similar to like a...
I get IVIG.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So you know exactly what that is. Yeah. So I had IVIG. There's also something else called plasmapheresis. So there are 2 treatments for GBS. They're typically given at the very beginning of a case of GBS. And they're not a cure, but for whatever reason, they typically will make the recovery better. For me, they gave it to me within the first 5 days and it didn't seem to help. I mean, I just went downhill and I didn't see really any improvements for over like 8 to 10 weeks. But I had a very good recovery. And so is it because of the IVIG? Very likely. I don't have any treatments anymore. Like I said, it's just at the beginning of a case of GBS, but there is another chronic form of GBS called CIDP, and they actually will have IVIG every 3 weeks, every 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know for myself, like I get IVIG every month. So it started off with 5 days and then it's like slowly tapered, and now ... We'll see if I get it next month. They're kind of like, okay, like let's start getting you off of it. So she's like, how do you feel after IVIG? I was like, I don't know. Alive still? Like, am I supposed to notice the difference? Like, I have no idea. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. And Holly, like you look, I mean, this is the thing. Everything's invisible, but like you look really healthy now. So where's your update as far as where you are now?
After I recovered, it was a long journey. I got out of the hospital after like 126 days. So my daughter was almost 6 months old by the time I got home, and it was just crazy. Like, it felt like I just like lost so much of my life and then was suddenly just like back in it. But I wasn't recovered completely. It was a really long journey. I had to, really pace myself. I dealt with really, really severe fatigue for a good probably 2 years. A lot of nerve pain. I was off work for a very long time, and just adjusting, and just not feeling like myself again. But I was very fortunate. I had a really good recovery. After about 2 years, I did start to kind of feel more like me. But I never did completely recover in the sense that I still deal with fatigue. I still deal with nerve pain from time to time, a lot of weird sensations. So the nerves obviously were damaged through my journey. And so, just little weird, like I feel like spiders sometimes are crawling on me, or like sudden like shock sensations. And so it's been a journey just figuring out what works for me and what doesn't and what aggravates it. And so it's been, 12 years. I've gone through bouts of very, very severe fatigue and increase in nerve pain and to a point where it was so severe that I thought I was getting GBS again and had to be hospitalized again. And so I've gone through that many times, and it's been, just a work in progress of figuring out what works well for me and what doesn't.
So did you have another baby after?
No, I didn't. I chose not to have any more children.
I can understand why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know we've had conversations with other guests on the show about family planning and how sometimes chronic illness can affect that. Do they think that may have been like the pregnancy, the overwhelm?
Yeah, so
body,
they believe
like the
that it was either like the pregnancy or the birth or the surgery. So surgery can be tied to GBS as well, or a known trigger. And so I had a C-section. So, it's impossible to say for sure, but just given the timeline, usually GBS will come on 3 to 4 weeks after some sort of event. And obviously that was when my daughter was born. So it was likely that. And for my case, it was just such a traumatizing experience. And I just was so worried about whether I wanted to go through that or not. I'm divorced now, and I'm in a bell-ended family, and he's got kids and I've got my daughter. And so,
okay, that's where the babies came from. I was like, I swear I've seen you with more than one.
Yeah, we've got 3 together. And so, it was like, if he didn't have children, that would have been a different conversation. But we're happy with 3. And so it was like, you know what, I'm not going to take that risk.
Yeah. So with your condition, then, is there risk of almost like a relapse or a trigger for?
There is. It's pretty rare. People hate that word though. Like it doesn't feel rare when it happens to you, right? So it's always there. It is possible. I've talked to many GBS survivors that they had a second bout of it. For me, I just live my life and I try not to let that worry me, just because it is so rare. So.
Yeah. So it's not something that's necessary.
No, not typically. I think it's like only like 5% of cases where they will have. And that's not to say that we don't still deal with, I mean, the residuals, which can be, for other people, it can be very, very debilitating at times.
Does it always come on so fast?
Absolutely.
Like you were 72 hours, right?
Yeah, not typically that quickly. Some yes, but some people it might be like a week or two. Typically, your most severe will be within 2 weeks. I also had a very severe case in the fact that I was ventilated, so only about 30% of GBS patients will actually be ventilated, and so the paralysis might only reach like up to their chest or even up to their waist, and then they'll have to start their recovery journey from there. Which, I mean, typically, I mean, that's going to be much easier because they're not going to have that entire journey of a recovery. But sometimes not everyone recovers. So everybody's so unique in this disease.
And so in your experience, I mean, that's so life-changing. I can't even imagine, especially like you just went through birth, you have a baby at home. There's this outlook of excitement in life. Through the emotional side of it, I know you've said you were quite low. I mean, how did that really affect your relationships? Obviously, parenting during recovery, family support, that type of thing.
Well, obviously, like when I was in the hospital, it looked quite different than when I was out. When I was in the hospital, it was I couldn't even focus on my daughter. I had to focus on myself, and which was very emotionally draining for me to have to ignore her. And it broke my heart. But she was, like I said, my inspiration to get better. But once I was recovering, it was an adjustment for sure. I had a baby, and I had to try to take care of her. I was very fortunate that I had such a great support system, which I think is key. And so, when I was off work, my husband at the time was off work, and my mom was taking care of me a lot, and so that was very, very helpful. Over the years, it's been an adjustment for sure, especially when I've gone through those bouts of severe fatigue, sometimes lasting weeks and months. And it's like, I'm really sorry, but mommy's got to lay down, and like, I need to have a nap. And, I'm just feeling really drained, and it's been tough. But like I said, just trying to find out what works for you is key.
It's like so crazy, everything that you've been through. Obviously you found an outlet to kind of get some of your story out by writing a book. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to put some pen to paper?
Absolutely. So when I recovered, right when I got out of the hospital, it was just crazy what I went through. I just couldn't believe it. Like, I had never gone through something so traumatic in my life. I'd always been healthy. And so it was just, I wanted to share my story and tell people what it was like to go through GBS, especially because I was in ICU for almost 3 months. And a lot of people think that being in ICU on a ventilator, that you're just like in a coma and you're just sleeping. That's not the case. I was like fully coherent, knew exactly what was going on, in a lot of pain, dealing with all these different issues and all of that. And so I really wanted to bring awareness to what it's like in the hospital, as well as GBS. I'd never heard of it. My family had never heard of it. None of our friends had heard of it. So I just really wanted to get the word out about what GBS is and what it can do to somebody. And it can affect people of all ages. Like, it affects children and people of all over the world. And so I just wanted to really just bring that awareness. And I actually went to go visit a doctor, or one of my doctors, and we were chatting about some of the stuff that I went to. And he was like, you should write a book. And it was just like this light bulb moment. And so I did. And I wrote my book, and have just been sharing it with the world. And I was very fortunate too. My mom took a lot of videos of me in the hospital. And so we've put that out on social media and stuff, which is amazing because I've been able to like connect with people all over the world, people that, had GBS 30 years ago and they'd never met a GBS person before, or doctors who've thanked me and said, thank you for sharing your story, because we don't always see the patient perspective. So it's been amazing. And I'm so happy that I did write that book, and I've been able to reach people kind of all over the world.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about meeting other survivors and, for that type of support within what's the word for it? But within that community, like where were you finding other people that had
So I
similar
was,
experiences?
somebody had reached out to us actually from the GBS Foundation. So there is actually a foundation. And so they connected us with people, and I was able to actually meet another survivor who actually came into my hospital room, and he'd recovered completely. And he walked in and he said, you know what, I've been in your shoes, and you're going to get through this. And that gave me so much hope. And so once I recovered, it was like, I want to do the same for somebody else. And I don't want them to ever think, when you're in ICU that you're not going to get out of that. And I think my story is like living proof that, you know what, I went from zero to where I am today. And so I wanted to really connect with the GBS Foundation. So after I was completely recovered, and I started meeting with them and started meeting other patients, and found this whole community of people online. I think social media is amazing for that, where we can, just find people no matter where they are in the world, especially through like simple things like hashtags, right? Like you could just connect that way. And so it's been.
Well, and when you're recovering without having to necessarily leave your home,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, back in the day, you had like in-person support groups, and that would make it very challenging. And so nowadays with social media, it's pretty amazing that we've got that. And I remember I went to my first GBS conference and met a whole bunch of people, and it was like, oh my God, my family, like these are people that understand, and they know what I've gone through, and they just can relate on a whole other level. And so I think that's so important, like really no matter what you're going through, or whether it's like a disease or even just any struggle, is like find somebody else or find that group of people that have been where you've been, either have already overcome it, or, they're going through it right now, because you can just relate on a whole other level.
Look how excited I got when I met someone else that's done IVIG. Like, oh, me too.
Exactly. It's just that Me Too movement, right? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, I get it. I understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I hadn't really thought about that experience of someone in the ICU on a ventilator. And, often we're like, oh, people are hospitalized. And then we talk about the journey after, because that can sometimes feel ignored. But the perspective of actually being in that space, people know something's wrong. You're there, but actually understanding that you're experiencing emotions and feelings, like it's really easy to dehumanize
it really is,
someone,
especially with GBS, because typically in ICUs, a lot of patients are sedated, or they might be recovering from like a car accident or something, and so they're not coherent. A lot of ICU patients as well aren't typically there for too long, but GBS is one of the things that, if you're there and you're ventilated, you might be there for a while. And so they don't necessarily know how to handle it. And I had a lot of ICU nurses and doctors that had never seen a case of GBS before, and they didn't know kind of what to do. And so my book has been really, really good for the medical community to, give them that perspective of what it's like to be completely paralyzed, not able to communicate, but still know exactly what's happening, and just kind of how to understand how to treat that person.
Were they bringing in any type of like mental health support for you, like during that stay? Like, did anybody have the thought like, hey, this girl's been sitting here lost in her thoughts for 70 days. Like, let's bring someone to talk to her.
No.
Man.
They didn't.
Well, and did you have strategies that you were using to kind of overcome during that time period? I mean, obviously, even continued after leaving the hospital, but that, like, it is such
it really was
struggle.
And I really put back on my care team, so the doctors and the nurses, mostly the nurses and the respiratory therapists who were handling my breathing. I mean, they were like my therapists, and they were just so wonderful with me, and they were just so supportive and rooting for me, and you got this, and we're here with you, we're fighting. They would wipe my tears and hold my hand and like just spend hours with me, and try to put makeup on me and do my hair and shave my legs and like just anything to brighten the mood. I had this sign on my wall, and you can actually see it behind me. I have it right behind me. It's the same wall that was on, or the same picture that was on my wall in the hospital. And it's courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at day's end saying, I will try again tomorrow. And that was just, it was like, that was like my motto. Like, I just stared at it every day and said, I may not be able to get through today, but I can always try tomorrow. And so that's just kind of what I promised myself, that I would just keep trying, keep fighting.
So since your recovery, what are the things that you're doing? I think too, when you go through a health struggle, it does become very forward facing in your life. It's something that becomes a lot more relevant, even just in your day-to-day life. Is there things that you're doing now to stay healthy? Is there things you're doing now to
Absolutely. So after I recovered, I had to go through a lot of physiotherapy. So I was doing like intense physio at a rehab hospital for a while, where I learned how to walk again. And I just saw the correlation between exercising regularly and how it made me feel. And it reduced my pain, and it helped my fatigue. So for me, exercising regularly has been life-changing for me. And it's actually, I think I point that out to my followers and stuff like that. It's been so important just to stay on top of it. Sleep is so key. Before that, it was like, I was in my 20s. I was like, I don't need sleep, right? But now it's like, no, it's so important. That's like the number one. And, maybe I wouldn't have thought of all this stuff had I not gone through GBS. But like you said, it just puts it on the forefront, and you really have to just be focused on your health.
So, random question. Your daughter's obviously seen you go through, some highs and lows, and it's been 12 years. Mm-hmm. So if all the 12-year-olds I know love to tell stories. So does your daughter ever talk about this, or like, does it ever come up? How does she talk about it?
She does. It's so funny because like, obviously she doesn't remember, but I talk about it so much. And like, I'm so heavily involved with the GBS Foundation. So it's such a huge part of my life. And so it's almost like she knows it all, and she's seen the videos. And so she's like, I feel like she feels like she was there, and she remembers it all, even though she doesn't, obviously. But it is such a huge part of her life. And when I was going through some hard times with my fatigue and stuff, it was tough, and she remembers those moments. And so when I'm doing better and when I'm healthier, she's just so grateful for that. And I think, it's just made our bond so much stronger, knowing what we went through together, and that, she was just that motivation for me to get better. And not only that, she brought so much laughter to such a dark time. She was a newborn, and she's doing all these funny things in ICU. And so she was just like this light and like this guardian angel. And so like our whole family, it's like, you were our guardian angel. And so, yeah, I think she just looks back. Yeah.
Oh, just that contrast of like, you're going through something so awful, but something so beautiful.
Yeah. And I just can't imagine had I not had her there, like it just would have been a very, very different story. But I think she's grateful for it too.
I know myself, like as I've like started regaining strength and mobility and stuff like that, my 6-year-old chirps me all the time. Like, he's like, oh, Mom, like you're like the third strongest person in this house. Like Mackenzie's stronger than you. I'm like, she's 4. She's not stronger than me. So they always bring like a sense of lightness to like a pretty dark situation.
Absolutely.
Cassie, did you want to introduce our little segment?
Okay, so the game Marry, Fuck, Kill, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of have like a twist on it. So it's marry for something that is like your tried and true, like self-care habit, product, whatever.
Yep.
Cheat. So that's like your guilty pleasure. It's kind of a little more fatty, not like fatty.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Fad-ish.
Okay, yeah.
I was going to spell it for you, but. And then screw is something that, you've tried it, you're sick of it, like good riddance, never want to see you again. So we'll start you off with marry.
Okay. Hot baths for sure. That's like my go-to for me when I'm dealing with nerve pain. It's just like instantly. And so I probably have a hot bath like every single day. Yeah.
I do the hot tub every single day, and then sometimes I'll have a bath.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like don't realize that, like if you do deal with like nerve pain specifically, is how helpful it can be, or even like muscle pain. For me, it's just so helpful.
Yeah, water has a definite healing side of it. Like even when you're like going through labor and it's getting heavy, like they're like, get in the shower, get in the shower. And like just that warm water on your body, like it does magic.
Exactly.
Okay. So what are you cheating with?
Cheating, cannabis.
Oh,
so that's my go-to. Again, with nerve pain, it's something that I find so helpful. And it's come a long way because, I mean, years and years ago, it was just like so frowned upon, and it was like it's not medicinal. And now, like they're linking studies to it, especially for GBS, that people are able to use it for medicinal purposes. And so for me, it's so helpful.
Do you like a little more CBD or a little
for?
Both. I've tried both. But for me personally, I actually find THC helps me better. But I know a lot of people that have said, CBD works better for pain, but I think it's just dependent on the person.
I think whole plant.
Yes.
When you extract just one thing, it doesn't work as well anyway. I even, for like my experience with that is just being on the transplant list. There's so many states, or Canada's pretty good with it, but that if you get tested and you have any cannabis in your system, that you'll be removed from the transplant list. And for so many people that that can't take other pain meds or management, even just a mental, emotional health. Yeah, it's still
we've come so far in Canada, and I know what you mean too, like about within the States and stuff too. Like for me, I've been on a lot of medications over the years as well to help with the nerve pain, and like medication that I got to take like 3 pills 3 times a day. The side effects, and it still never helped me the way that cannabis can in an instant. And I'll talk to patients that are in the US, and it's just like their doctors are still saying, no, that doesn't help you. And it's like, but it does help me. So it's unfortunate.
Okay. And last but not least, screw it. You're done. What is it?
I'm going to say acupuncture. I've only tried it a few times, and everybody that I know is like, no, you just have to keep going. You just have to keep trying. And I'm just, it's just not my thing. It's never really helped me. And the whole experience just kind of creeps me out.
I recognize when I would get so much anxiety going to my acupressure appointments. So
it depends on the person. I still talk to people that are like swear by it. So I think it's really about trying what works for you.
Totally. I had a little bit of success with it, but at the same time, I don't know if it was the drugs, like the endless amount of steroids that I was on. But back in September, Holly, my hands were like hooked. I could not straighten that shit at all. Like it was horrible.
Yeah, that's what now I had for like the first 3 months.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was the prednisone that eventually took out the inflammation, but I was getting a lot of acupuncture in my arms to loosen it up. Here we are. I'm not getting acupuncture very often anymore, but I'm flipping the bird.
Well, and I think too, it's a combination of things too. I don't know if there's any one treatment for anyone or for anything. And it's so much the individual and what works.
I knew we weren't going to be able to keep this down to 20 minutes. I just knew it. I was like, Jenny, wait until you hear this girl's story.
It's just like a TV. They can make a movie.
And there's a movie called Brain on Fire. It's on Netflix, and a girl, she went through. It's not the same, but she went through it an autoimmune disorder that's kind of same progression. And so if you ever want to watch something that's kind of similar.
Where can people find your book?
So it's on Amazon right now, just in the process of getting it into bookstores actually. But Amazon would be the quickest and easiest way to get it. And it's called Life Support Surviving Guillain-Barre Syndrome.
Awesome. Well, and we'll have all the links and everything in the show notes for listeners. Do you have any kind of last words, any words of wisdom that you would share if someone was going through a similar experience, or maybe has a family member that is going through?
Yeah, I would just say to never give up. There's a lot of people that they lose hope. And especially if you're in that specific situation and not realizing that there is hope to get better, find that community of people, learn as much as you can, and just try to find whatever works for you. Like you said, it's trial and error, and trying to learn as much as you can, and what things might help you and what things don't, and just never giving up on yourself.
Love it.
And and also I'll take a note of the quote in the background too and add that to the show notes, because it is. Yeah. And I remember when I was going through my journey, I think we kind of touched base on the very beginning, we were saying you're such a warrior, you're so strong. And I remember that would just kill me because I didn't feel strong. I'm in ICU and I'm paralyzed. And when you're going through it, you don't feel like you're strong. You don't feel like you're getting through it. You don't feel like you're handling it. And I think that quote is just such a good reminder that, courage doesn't always roar. It's not us being I got this. Sometimes it's just you're crying, you got tears in your eyes and you're just I can't do this, but you just try again tomorrow.
But man, look back, just 12 years ago, you crushed it. Look at how far you've come. Look what you've been through. Now people are you're a warrior, you're a fighter.
Yeah.
And I hope that you put your hands in the air and cheer for yourself. And you're fuck yeah, I am.
Yeah, I do. And I hope that people are able to do that with their own journeys, right? And just, have that hope that you're going to get through this. And I think my story of literally being paralyzed from neck down, I had to relearn how to do everything. And so if I can go from that to basically recovered and living my life again, there is hope for everyone.
Hey mamas, we see you. And we want you to join our Facebook community where we can connect and continue the conversation.
Join our private Facebook group at My Invisible Disease, because no one should go through this alone.
Thank you for listening, and check us out at myinvisibledisease.com.